Good evening. I hope everybody's beginning of the week started off well and it just leads into a more beautiful week. Starting this Thursday, we begin a 3-week period of mourning for the Holy Temple. And it's called Shavasar B'Tammuz. It's a fast day, the 17th of Tammuz. It marks the day that the walls of the Holy Temple were breached, and we mourn for a 3-week period until the 9th of Av, it concludes with a fast day as well. The 9th of Av is the day that both holy temples in Jerusalem were destroyed. So every single year, for these 3 weeks, we mourn the destruction of the Holy Temple. We don't listen to music, there's no weddings, and many different various laws that concern mourning during this 3-week period, beginning with the 17th of Tammuz, which is this Thursday, and concluding with Tisha B'Av with the 9th of Av. But why are we still mourning? The Second Temple was destroyed, according to most opinions, in 70 CE. So it's been 1950 years since the destruction. What are we still commemorating? Why don't we focus on the future? Why don't we focus on the rebuilding, on the beauty, on the fact that we survived, on the fact that we're still here, that we're still a nation, that we're strong, that we're powerful, that thank God we have the Holy Land? Why do we keep on focusing for almost 2,000 years on destruction? Why do we focus on something negative? Judaism is about positivity. It's about light. It's about showing that light overpowers darkness. And yet for 3 weeks every year, we mourn a destruction that seemingly happened that seemingly occurred close to 2,000 years ago. Now the Lubavitcher Rebbe, quoting the Rogachover Goen, shares some amazing insight. And he tells us, what if we're not commemorating something that happened 2,000 years ago? What if we're not commemorating something that happened in the past, something that was? The Holy Temple is constantly being destroyed. Every single moment that the temple is not rebuilt, it's being destroyed. So this destruction is an ongoing event. And every year, for 3 weeks, we take note of that, and we learn about it, and we discuss it. Because we're told in the Talmud that whoever does not see the Holy Temple rebuilt in his days, it's as if it was destroyed in his days. And which Jew would see this beautiful Holy Temple burning to the ground and not be moved to do something about it? Even if he had a heart of stone, even if he felt no connection, if he saw this beautiful home of God being burned to the ground, he would be moved to change something, to try and rebuild it, to try to stop the flames, stop the fire. So we have to recognize that we're not commemorating something that happened 2,000 years ago, but rather we're commemorating something that's an ongoing event. We're commemorating something that we have to think about, that we have to learn about, and that we have to try to rebuild on a constant basis. So how do we rebuild it? Well, let's talk about the temple within. Firstly, we're told that when the Beis Hamikdash, when the Holy Temple was destroyed, God moved his presence to exile into all the temples, into all the shuls, into all the synagogues and the houses of learning. And each one of those synagogues, each one of those houses of learning has become a mini temple, a small temple during the time of exile where the holy presence rests. Because clearly God is everywhere in the world. So what was different about the Holy Temple? It was obvious, it was apparent, it was revealed that God was there. So during exile, every shul, every synagogue, every Beis Medrash, every house of learning and prayer becomes this mini temple. Now during the pandemic, during this coronavirus, we see more than ever how our homes, each one of our homes, has to become our Holy Temple. Because when we're not allowed in the synagogue, when we're not allowed to pray in large groups of people, we have to try to transform our homes, build our homes into our holy temples. How do we do that? By making sure that it's apparent, it's revealed through the practical choices we make that God's presence exists here. by making sure that it's obvious that there's a revelation of a divine in our home, and then our homes, our places of worship where we're praying, where we're learning, where we're treating people kindly, become the temple of today. Now, in the holy temple, there were the priests, and the priests were the elite. People think they were always involved in holy, divine services. They were involved in very spiritual and lofty things. But the priests were also involved in the menial tasks and upkeep of the holy temple. They washed the floors, they did the laundry. Specifically for Jewish women, the Rebbe would point out how we're the priests of our home. When we do these things, and they may seem menial tasks, but they make our homes into a beautiful space, into a holy space, into a kind space, we're being the priests of our temple. We should never feel that a task is beneath the dignity of a priest. Because look at the priests in the holy temple who are considered the elite. The little things, the small things that we do to make our homes beautiful and refined and godly and a godly space, those things create this temple, this beautiful sanctuary that we're lacking. But to get even more microcosmic, to think even in a smaller version of a temple, when the Jewish people were commanded to build the temple, the original time, the first time, it says, "Ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham," which means make for me a sanctuary, make for me a mikdash, a temple, and I will dwell in them. Now clearly, grammatically, it should say I will dwell in it. And our sages teach that the reason why I dwell in them is because God is telling us I will dwell in every single Jew. Every single one of us personally can become a temple. And that's why it's so important to understand the details of the services that were done in the temple and the items that were in the temple, because each one teaches us how we can personally become this divine space, how we can personally become this holy spiritual space, a place where God's presence is clear, it's revealed, it's obvious. So we discuss and we dissect and we learn about the Holy Temple, not because it's something that existed 2,000 years ago. We discuss it and we learn it because it's something that we want to rebuild in ourselves personally and in our homes in a more communal level, and then eventually all of our actions causing it to be rebuilt. So today I want to talk about one item in the Holy Temple and the service of that item and how we can learn from that, how to refine ourselves, how to be better people, how to be more whole, how to be more godly, how to be more divine. Today I'm going to talk about the Mizbeach, the altar. And there were actually two altars in the Holy Temple. There was the golden altar that was inside, and there was the copper altar that was called the outer Mizbeach, the outer altar. The altar represents our heart. And the same way we have the inner dimension of our heart and the external dimension of our heart, that's that which we feel inside and that which we express outside. Each of the altars in the Holy Temple represent the inner dimensions of our heart and the external dimensions of our heart. Now there's an interesting command about the external altar, about our external heart. It says in the Torah, Eish tamid tukat al mizbeach. There has to be a constant fire on the altar. And it's talking about the external altar. And what it's telling us is, what's fire? Fire is passion. Fire is enthusiasm. In the external part of our hearts, in the part of our hearts that's revealed to those around us, there has to be an expression of enthusiasm and passion for godliness, for Torah, for Judaism, for divinity, for anything that's holy. There always had to be a fire on that altar, constantly by man. There was a godly fire that came down from heaven, but it would only come down, it would only be elicited once man would do his part in igniting that fire, which teaches us that there always has to be an external show of passion and enthusiasm for our Judaism. Now, what's interesting is our sages tell us that even on Shabbat, and even when someone was impure, this fire had to be lit. Now, Shabbat and impurity are two opposite ends of the spectrum. And there's a message for us, because like we said, every single detail in the service of the Holy Temple represents something that we can do in our lives, something how we can create ourselves and make ourselves into this temple for God. So what does it mean, even on Shabbat, this fire had to be lit? What does it have to do with us and our passion and our enthusiasm for Judaism? Even on Shabbat. Shabbat represents an intellectual connection with God. Shabbat represents the removal from physicality. You're involved in something holy. You're withdrawn from the physical world. Shabbat represents doing something good. And we might think that when we're involved in something good, when we're involved in something positive, who cares if there's passion? Who cares if there's enthusiasm? As long as we're doing the right thing, okay, it's enough. I also need passion. I also need enthusiasm. I'm preparing for Passover. I'm preparing for Pesach. I have to clean my house. Can I kvetch? Can I complain? Can I say, oh, it's so hard? And then tell my kids, come on, we have Passover coming. It's so hard. Let's clean the house, and anxiety and stress. And here is where the Torah tells us, even on Shabbat, even when you're involved in a mitzvah, you need to have enthusiasm. We need to have passion. When we're preparing for Shabbat and our children, our family, those who live around us see that we're excited, that we're happy, that we're passionate about this mitzvah, it gives it eternity. We know that that excitement will be passed on to future and next generations. When we're preparing for a bar mitzvah and we're not stressed out, we don't feel like, oh gosh, the weight of this holy event, of this beautiful occasion. When we're preparing for a holiday and our children see that it induces joy, it induces enthusiasm, it induces passion, then we know it will be continued. Because something that's exciting and that we're passionate about doesn't dry out, doesn't get dull. So when we're doing a mitzvah, when we're doing something holy, when it's Shabbat, we need that fire lit. Even though we might think it's okay. We're doing the right thing. We're good to go. I always tell my Hebrew school teachers in the beginning of the year who work in our Chabad Hebrew school that more important than what they teach the children is that they're enthusiastic and passionate about what they're teaching. Because more than the details that the children will remember about all the various subjects that they learn about, I want them to walk out of Hebrew school passionate and excited about their Judaism. I don't want them to feel how their parents felt, oh, it's Hebrew school, we have to go to Hebrew school. Because even if they come out with tremendous amount of Jewish knowledge, they learned the right thing, they did the right thing, but if they're not passionate and excited about it, how can we ensure that it will be passed on to the next generation? So yes, when it comes to holy things on Shabbat, even when we're involved in intellectual pursuits and a godly connection, we need passion, we need excitement, we need enthusiasm, because that ensures continuity. And then we have the opposite end of the spectrum. What about when we're impure? Why is it important to have passion then? Who said we're even capable of passion when we're suffering, when we're struggling with doing the right thing? We barely could do the right thing most of the time. We're not observant. We're not involved in mitzvot. We're not involved in Torah. You're telling me to be passionate? Isn't that hypocritical? Isn't that two-faced? If I don't even keep it all the time, I should be passionate about it? And here the Torah says, yes, even when you feel like you're impure, even when we feel like we're perhaps not there yet, even when we feel like we're struggling, like we don't have a connection that we're supposed to have, even when we're impure, we need the fire, we need the passion. We might feel like, why should I light the Shabbat candle if I know that I'm not going to keep the full Shabbat? Why should I be excited about that mitzvah if I know that I'm not really even keeping the whole thing? We might think, why should I go to a Torah class if I don't necessarily keep all the things that I learn about? I can't be passionate about it if it's not really who I am. Maybe I'm incapable of the passion. Why should I be excited, passionate about eating kosher meat if I'm not keeping kosher fully? I'm impure. I'm not the real deal. I don't do everything. I'm not observing everything I'm supposed to. I'm impure. You're telling me I have to have passion? And yes, here's what we learn again. The altar in the big holy temple that teaches us about our altar, about our heart. It had to have a fire even when the Jewish people were impure. There had to be a fire there. Even when we're in a state of impurity, we still have to have passion. What does passion feel like? What's this passion for godliness? Well, it's the same passion we feel for the things that we're naturally inclined to from our animalistic desires. So passion naturally comes more dominantly from our animal soul. It involves the things that we like. And we have to take that passion, the passion that we normally have for things that perhaps are not godly, and transform it to a passion for godliness. Now, naturally, our godly soul is a more intellectual being. It's more connected to cold intellectual connection. It has a connection to God, but it's not as passionate as the animal soul. The animal soul is naturally more emotional. So if we can take the passion of the animal soul and transform it to a passion for something holiness, we have a passion that's much stronger than the godly soul could ever achieve. When we take our enthusiasm and our passion that we naturally have and we use it towards something godly, it becomes a much stronger relationship than the godly soul was ever able to be achieved on its own. And that's why it says, a constant fire should be on the altar. It should not be extinguished. But if we do a little play on words, we're told in Hasidic thought, lo tichbeh, the constant fire should be on the altar, and then the negativity will be extinguished. As long as we have passion, there's hope. As long as we have enthusiasm, there's hope that the passion will take the negativity and extinguish it. The fire will extinguish anything that's not godly, anything that is inhibiting our connection to God. It's like they say, a teacher, she could have the best discipline plan in place, but more important than a discipline plan is an exciting lesson. Then she doesn't even need the discipline because the students are involved. And it's the same thing with our own inner temple. If we have that fire, that passion, that excitement for God constantly lit, then we could be assured that everything else, our deeds, our actions, our speech, our thought will follow suit. Even if it's not always, even if we fail, even if sometimes we're impure. If we have that passion for godliness, for divinity, for holiness, for good things, for creating light, naturally the actions will follow suit. Now we're told that we have to remember Amalek. Who is Amalek? He was the first nation to attack the Jewish people when they left Egypt. The Jewish people left Egypt. They were the high of the world. Egypt was the superpower of the world, and the Jewish people left with the mighty hand. Egypt was destroyed, and all the nations of the world knew about it, and they were frightened completely from the Jewish people. And then Amalek came, and he fought them, and he lost. He was destroyed. He completely did not win that war, but he cooled it off for the rest of the nations. The terminology that's used in the Torah is, you should remember Asher karcha baderech, that he happened on you on the way. And the word karcha also means cold. He cooled you off. The nations of the world were no longer scared as they were of the Jews because somebody dared to fight them. The example that's given is if there's this boiling, burning hot bath and everybody's scared to go in because they might get burnt. And the first person who goes in does get burnt, but he cools it off for everybody else. And that's what Amalek did to the Jewish people. He cooled it off for the rest of the nations of the world. So why are we commanded to remember about this evil Amalek, this man, this nation who cooled off for the rest of the nations of the world? Because we each have an internal Amalek. We each have this part of us that tries to cool us off, that tries to say, you're going to a Torah class? Come on, that's so not you. You want to light Shabbat candles, but you're not even keeping Shabbat. So why would you light the candles? You're putting on tefillin? Come on, you know that's not really who you are. So sometimes the Amalek is coming from inside of us. It's our evil inclination. And sometimes it's the external voices of people that know us. And they try to cool us off. We're passionate. We heard something. We were inspired. We want to change. We want to grow. We want to become better. And then all of a sudden a voice comes and says, come on, that's not really you. That's not really who you are. That's Amalek, trying to cool off the passion. And as a Jew, we have the obligation to remember Amalek. Always, constantly, every day. Remember that we should not be cooled off. You need the constant fire on that altar. You need the constant passion and enthusiasm. And you could be assured that if you have it, that there will be continuity to your observance. It will be passed on, even if we're not perfect, even if we're impure some of the time, or even most of the time. Keep the passion alive. Remember Amalek. Remember what he tried to do it to us. Remember how he tried to cool it off, to cool us off. Anytime you're excited, you're passionate, you're enthusiastic about doing something good, about becoming a better person, and then there's a voice inside or outside that tries to say, come on, chill out. It's not so important. It's not really who you are. Remember Amalek. Remember that internal altar. That altar that we have to constantly make sure that there's a flame that's lit. And remember that the Jewish people would light the flame on that altar. And then there was a godly fire that came down as a response to the effort that we put in. And that the same thing happens with us. We have to light the fire. We have to make sure that we have passion, we have enthusiasm. And the same way that the fire that came down from heaven on the altar in the holy temple was much more infinite and much more miraculous than the fire that the human beings lit. When we do our thing, when we put forth that effort, when we're excited, when we're passionate, when we have the fire on our altar, then God responds with the infinite godly fire that far exceeds any effort that we put in, far greater than anything we could have accomplished on our own in our finite abilities. So are all these temples. Each one of us is a temple. We're not talking about the temple that was destroyed 1950 years ago. We have to make sure to rebuild our inner temples. We have to look at that temple and understand that it's constantly being destroyed, and we have to constantly make sure to rebuild it, and we rebuild it by making sure that we ourselves are a receptacle for the divine. We ourselves are in a revealed space where God is expressed. And we have to make sure we have that fire. We have to make sure that we're passionate. And when we're passionate about it, then the details don't make a difference. Big, small, if I'm excited about something, every part of it is important. I know for myself personally, I love to bake. I'm passionate about it. And I care about every detail. I was actually thinking about this on Shavuot, because every year on Shavuot I make cheesecakes. And then I top the cheesecakes with beautiful toppings, either whipped cream or caramel, which means you don't even see the top of the cheesecake. And yet, I take every effort. I do the water bath. I wrap it with silver foil. I do the whole 9 yards to make sure that the tops of my cheesecake will not be brown and will not have cracks. And it makes no sense because you're not even going to see the top because I'm going to put some topping on it. But I'm passionate about baking, so I care about the details. Because when we're passionate about something, every single detail of it matters. So if we're passionate about holiness and godliness, when we learn Torah, we're not going to limit it. Okay, I'm only going to learn Torah for 10 minutes. Because when we care about something, when we're enthusiastic about it, we don't limit it. We do it as much as we can because we love it and we're happy about it and we're enthusiastic about it. When we do the mitzvot, we don't just keep the mitzvot to exactly the letter of the law. We do it with passion, with excitement, with enthusiasm. There's this mitzvah of the etrog that we use on Sukkot, where we have to shake the lulav and the etrog, the 4 species together. And when it comes to an etrog, there's various prices. You can get one for very cheap, because it's really just a glorified lemon, or there's actually etrogim that are hundreds of dollars. And one year, a man came to my husband. He bought his etrog, and he sees my husband's etrog, and it looks a little bit more grand. And my husband told him how much this etrog that he bought for Sukkot cost. And the man says to him, I don't understand you. Why are you spending so much money on a lemon? Why are you spending so much money on an etrog? Come on, you're doing the mitzvah even if you buy the cheap one. The cheapest one on the market is still the mitzvah. So why are you spending so much money to get a more beautiful etrog? Now this man was very into cars. So my husband says to him, why do you drive such an expensive luxury car? Why do you need that? You have your car to bring you from point A to point B. If you have a Honda, a Toyota, it will take you from point A to point B. Why do you need a luxury car? He said, because I like it. I'm into it. So my husband said to him, and that's how it should be for a mitzvah. If we're into it, if we care about it, if we're enthusiastic about it, we're not satiated with just saying, okay, I'll get the cheapest one. I'll do it in the smallest way possible. Okay, I have to help her, so I'll help her in the most minimal way possible. I have to do this for him, but I'll do it I'll schlep myself through the act. If we're enthusiastic, if we're passionate, the things that we do will show it. There'll be more excitement, there'll be more enthusiasm, and it will be a more beautiful mitzvah and a much stronger and deeper connection. So as we enter into this week where we're about to commemorate the destruction of the temple, that didn't just happen 1950 years ago, but it's a consistent event. It's constantly happening. And the same way it's constantly being destroyed, we have to constantly work on rebuilding it. Let's make sure to keep our fires burning. Let's make sure that that passion, that enthusiasm, that excitement that we have for doing good, for teaching good, for becoming better, regardless of our situation, regardless if we're involved in a mitzvah or we think we're impure, let's make sure that fire is always lit. Have a great week.